new film, What is a Woman, is now the most successful piece of content the Daily Wire has ever produced. Record numbers of people have watched it. The film has been trending online for days. It's easily one of the most talked about and debated films of the year. It's been an enormous smash success and already made, I think, an immediate and seismic impact on the culture. None of this would have been possible without you guys in the audience supporting the film and supporting our mission more broadly by subscribing to the Daily Wire. We're trying to build something so that we can continue making films like What is a Woman and other sorts of films and pieces of content that will impact the culture in different but still important ways. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd ask you to consider going to whatisawoman.com and getting signed up. We may not have the whole, extensive content library of like Netflix, not yet anyway, but we're on a mission and we're making art that matters. We're kind of the way I look at it is kind of the scrappy underdogs, the unwelcome intruders in the subscription streaming world right now. But there's a lot of fun to be had in that role. That's the good news. And it enables us to make things that literally nobody else, anywhere else, could or would ever make, like What is a Woman? Now, one of the reasons why nobody would make What is a Woman is because the subject matter is, of course, radioactive. I mean, gender ideology is the ultimate third rail. It's supercharged, considered untouchable by most people. There are increasing numbers of people, I think, who will kind of dance around the edges of the issue, talk about sports teams and bathrooms and that sort of thing. But very few people will go after the heart of this thing. It's one thing to suggest that males don't belong in women's bathrooms. It's another thing to call into question the actual underlying premise of gender ideology and transgenderism. The thing is, as it turns out, even if you're trying to stay around the edges, it doesn't really work because you can't make an argument against males in women's bathrooms without questioning the underlying premise. If you're trying to keep the underlying premise intact and say nothing about that, then you've already surrendered the entire issue. So that's what we try to do in this film, is go after the underlying premise. And because we succeeded so dramatically in exposing the hollowness at the core of this ideology, and because we knew we had succeeded, we also knew that there would be blowback, to releasing this. Though, of course, there was never any thought given to not releasing it. This is a bomb, in effect, metaphorically, and it's a bomb that we knew we had to detonate, come what may. And as for what is coming my way now, there are the expected things that we've talked about, coordinated campaigns to deplatform me, lies and smears and defamation being spread about me, even to the point of leftists photoshopping tweets to try to embarrass and libel me. Every day I see a new tweet that I never tweeted that's making the rounds online. This was the extent of the backlash until the last day or two when the death threats started rolling in. We have our security team tracking those, and the police have been notified. Might have a little bit more specific on those threats soon, but for now I'll just leave it at that. Also, I should note that I'm an avid fan of the Second Amendment and more than willing to make full use of my constitutional rights should any of these keyboard warriors decide to try their luck in the real world. But the death threats are sometimes not as revealing as the death wishes. And there are a great many of those on Twitter right now directed at me. Most people anyway, are hesitant to make explicit physical threats. And the people who have not been hesitant to make those physical threats are going to learn why they ought to have been. But a lot of people are much more confident and feel a lot better about, especially trans activists, who are some of the most vicious and cowardly people on the planet. They're not as shy about telling you what they hope happens to you because they feel like that gives them a little bit of cover. So just a few examples. I mentioned the death threats that we've been getting on Twitter yesterday. I mentioned it. And here's how leftists and trans activists responded. I'm going to read a few here, just a few examples. One says, seeing fascist bigots scared for their life is so satisfying. Another, hopefully the cops are as effective at protecting you and your family as they were at protecting the children and teachers in Uvalde. Another says, you deserve all of it. Another says, you deserve worse. Another says, ha, good. I look forward to hearing how the cops stood around and watched. Another says, hopefully some of those threats have some weight behind them. Another says, rotten hell, I hope somebody carries them out. Another one says, LMFAO, hope someone pulls through. When you're actively discrediting and threatening the lives of thousands of trans people all over, you deserve to get your rocked. Another one says, fingers crossed they're credible. And you get the idea. Hundreds more where that came from. I mean, hundreds. They're also posting this stuff in their own circles online. For example, one account posted a fake obituary for me, which said, breaking, American political commentator and podcaster Matt Walsh has passed away in his Tennessee home, Further details have yet to be determined. And I responded to that post with a link to whatiswoman.com, and they immediately deleted it. Another account posted, RT if you think Matt Walsh should never enjoy another moment of peace as long as he lives. That tweet had 3,000 likes. And I responded to that one with a link to the website as well, and he also deleted it. There are, again, hundreds, if not thousands of tweets like this. A great many of them are, apparently without a hint of sarcasm or irony, accusing me of committing genocide. That's their words, committing genocide against trans people. And of course I deserve to die. They say I've committed genocide with a documentary. My documentary is apparently, it's like that movie, The Ring. Remember that in the early 2000s, where if you watched it, a monster would come out of the screen and kill you in some unspecified but really disturbing way. That's what they seem to think anyway. But they could find out for sure if they went to whatiswoman.com and became a subscriber today. Now, I want to make just a few points about this. And the first is that there are some who will sort of dismiss this by saying that, well, this is how people are on the internet. Happens on both sides, they'll say. And that's not totally true. I mean, even if it was, it wouldn't make it okay, obviously, but that's not totally true. Yes, I mean, anyone on any side of any issue may receive a death threat or two if they get a lot of negative attention for something they said. And yes, there are anonymous trolls posting heinous stuff on both sides. But anyone who's ever poked the gender ideology beehive knows that trans activists are uniquely vicious and feel especially entitled to say and do whatever they want. Let me ask you something. What if there was someone out there who kept a log of every single thing you did every minute of the day? I think that'd be pretty creepy if that were to happen. Well, what if I told you that's exactly what happens every time you go online? Your internet provider like AT&T or Comcast is allowed to store logs of every website you've ever visited and can legally sell this data to anybody. That's why I always use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through their secure server, so your internet provider can't see or log what you do online. Now, many of you might be wondering, well, if I'm routing all my data through a VPN, it doesn't just, then doesn't that just mean that the VPN can see what I'm doing and log my data instead? And you're right to think that. Many VPNs claim to have a no logs policy, but have been caught logging customer activity anyway. Well, ExpressVPN, the good news is, it's the only VPN I trust because they use trusted server technology. They were the first major VPN provider to engineer all of their VPN servers to run in RAM. This makes it impossible for their VPN servers to store any data, including logs of any ExpressVPN customer. And you don't have to take my or ExpressVPN's word for it. ExpressVPN is so confident in their no logs claim, they've even had one of the biggest insurance firms, PwC, audit their technology. So this is very something you can trust. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online. Visit expressvpn.com/MattWalshShow right now and find out how you can get 3 months free. As someone who has a lot of experience poking various beehives, including literal beehives, as we talked about yesterday, I can say for sure that no group is quite like the trans activists in this regard. I mean, even take like BLM. We know what BLM is willing to do. Well, I've said a lot of things and done a lot of things to upset BLM, and I've gotten the blowback for it, but it's never quite like this. So why is it like this with the left-wing trans activists? Well, it's partly because they're amoral narcissists, partly because they've been emboldened by social media platforms and by every other institution to act out in whatever that way they want without consequence. And it's partly because, as previously mentioned, they've told themselves this delusional story and been told this delusional story that anyone who criticizes their worldview is a clear and present danger to their very physical existence. One trans activist summarized this delusion quite well in response to my tweet about the death threats I'd received. And it said, here's the thing. We trans people are not prepared to be removed from society. The fact that you were prepared for death threats means that this is an operation, a planned move to kill us. You are inciting violence. We are backed into a corner with a knife to our throat. You see, with my documentary, I have backed them into a corner with a knife to their throat. And this gives them the moral right to kill my whole family. They really believe that. At least they want to believe it, and they've worked very hard to fool themselves into taking this kind of delusional, hysterical nonsense seriously. This is the consequence, by the way, the intended consequence of the words are violence nonsense, because it empowers people like this. It gives them the excuse to be even more vile and vicious than they were already inclined to be. It's also the consequence of our societal obsession with affirmation. You know, these activists have come to believe that they have a God-given human right to be affirmed. That is, to have everyone in the world agree with them and reinforce their self-perception. And they are so convinced of this notion that when they encounter a non-affirming opinion or thought or film, they take it as a threat to their lives. They don't know how to not be affirmed, right? Like most of us, I encounter stuff all the time that doesn't exactly affirm me and my beliefs. So that's part of life. I don't break down into tears over it. I don't take it as it's going to kill me. Like there are no words you can say to me that the words themselves will kill me. But over here, this is the attitude. They don't know how to operate in a world that is anything less than 100% affirming all the time, everywhere, with no exceptions. Hollywood makes hundreds of movies and shows every year that suck up to them. One film is released on a platform they aren't even subscribed to, which takes the opposite approach, and they feel it gives them moral license to murder the person responsible for it. When I say the left wants you dead, I mean, I say it from experience, and it is actually true. And that brings me to my final point. And I want to be very clear about this to the people who are posting these things and making these threats. First of all, you don't scare me. Your ideology is a threat to society, to children, to women, to all people, to reality itself. I'm never going to stop pointing that out or fighting against you and against everything you believe. This reaction only cements me even more in my convictions. It radicalizes me even more than I already was. And I didn't think that I could be any more radical about it. And it makes me even more convinced than ever that this film is necessary and important. And I'm so happy we made it. Couldn't be happier. And I'll tell you this, the more you keep this up, the more offensive my next film is going to be. You're doing this to yourselves. Actions have consequences. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.